Have you ever felt just completely drained by your job? So exhausted that it feels like it's way more than just stress? Well, it turns out your brain totally agrees with you. Okay, so today we're going to dive into some really groundbreaking research that has found a distinct, measurable fingerprint of burnout right in our brain's electrical activity.
And look, this isn't some small niche problem. The research we're looking at highlights that in super high stress jobs, we're talking about healthcare workers, teachers, first responders, more than half of them are dealing with burnout. That is a truly staggering number. And this brings up a huge question, one that scientists and doctors have been debating for decades. Is burnout just, a subjective feeling of being overworked? Or is it a genuine diagnosable disorder with a real physical basis in the brain? To really get why this is such a big deal, we have to rewind the clock a bit. The term burnout was actually first used way back in the 1970s. It was describing the exhaustion and, frankly, the cynicism that people were seeing in volunteer clinic workers. And for 50 years since then, the debate has just been raging. This right here, this really gets to the heart of that 50-year mystery. So on one side, you've got the official World Health Organization. They classify burnout as a workplace phenomenon, and they're explicit about it. It is not a medical condition. But on the other side, there's this growing mountain of evidence that says, no, this is a distinct clinical disorder. And this isn't just about words. Without a clinical diagnosis, you can't get insurance coverage for treatment, and it's way, way harder to justify things like prevention programs. So how do you solve a mystery like this? Well, you listen to the brain. Scientists have turned to this incredibly powerful tool called an electroencephalogram, or EEG, to look for objective biological clues coming directly from the source itself. And this process is actually pretty straightforward. First, you just listen. You place these little sensors on the scalp. Then you record the brain's incredible symphony of electrical rhythms. And finally, the really cool part, you isolate the sound of just one single instrument's reaction to a specific thing happening. This technique lets us see not just the brain's background noise, but its precise millisecond by millisecond responses to the world. It's amazing. Okay, so where did the researchers even begin their investigation? Well, before putting the brain under any kind of stress, they first wanted to know, what does a burned out brain even look like when it's just hanging out, when it's at rest? And the results were pretty striking. The brain's fundamental operating rhythm, it's called its alpha frequency, it was slower. You can think of it like the brain's idle speed was just running way too low. Not only that, there was a lot less power in that rhythm, and the communication between different parts of the brain had started to get fragmented. The paper describes this state perfectly as wired but tired. The brain is chronically overstimulated, but its ability to talk to itself efficiently is actually breaking down. But that resting state, that was just the beginning of the story. The most definitive evidence, the real smoking gun, that showed up when scientists looked at how the burned out brain reacts when it's under pressure, when it has to make decisions and deal with its own mistakes. And this quote from the study, this is everything. The researchers found a unique neurophysiological signature, a true fingerprint of burnout, and they call it an alarm-heavy/evaluation-poor profile. So what on earth does that actually mean? Okay, so the first half of the fingerprint is that the brain's alarm system is basically stuck on max volume. The neural circuits that are supposed to detect conflicts and mistakes, they're hyperreactive. Every little screw up, every tiny unexpected thing, it triggers this huge exaggerated alarm signal in the brain. But here's the wild part, the paradox. While that alarm is just blaring, the brain's evaluation system has gone quiet. The very resources you need to consciously process that alarm, to learn from your mistake, and to figure out what to do next, they're just depleted. We're talking activity reduced by as much as 50%. It's kind of like a smoke detector that screeches every time you make toast, but there's no one home to actually check if the house is on fire. And here's the kicker. This fingerprint is totally unique. A lot of people mix up burnout with depression, but the brain tells a very different story. You can see it right here. Burnout has that slower base rhythm, while depression shows this imbalance of activity in the front of the brain. With burnout, brain regions are disconnected, but with depression, they can actually be too connected, kind of stuck in a bad loop. And that hyperreactive error alarm, that is specific to burnout. So, after all that, what's the verdict? Well, the evidence is pretty overwhelming. Burnout isn't just a feeling or some vague phenomenon. It has a clear, consistent, and unique signature in the brain.
This totally refutes its current classification as a non-disease and basically confirms it's a clinical disorder of our brain's circuitry.
And why does this matter so much? Because changing that formal classification changes literally everything. It means people could finally get insurance to cover treatment. It means employers and governments have a real scientific reason to invest in prevention. It totally reframes burnout, not as some kind of personal failing, but as a medical condition. And by doing all that, it has the potential to save billions of dollars, and even more importantly, protect the well-being of millions of our most skilled professionals.
Which really leaves us with this one final critical question. If science can now clearly see the fingerprint of burnout on the brain, why is society so slow to treat it like a real medical condition? The evidence is here. The question now is, what are we going to do with it?